field or someplace like that. And what Uncle James would tell me, what Uncle Kent would tell me, is that what they heard was he was a brakeman on the railroad. Okay, whatever I found really substantiated that. One is his watch, and we'll talk some more about that. This is his watch. It was in this box that I was able to borrow from Diane Stevens, Hot. And you have to remember the time. This was in 1900 or so that he started working on the railroads as a brakeman. And the railroads were a big deal then, okay? If you've been riding in the wagon all your life and suddenly you get on a railroad and you're going somewhere, it's fast. They were a big deal in the 1900s and on, and it was a good job for young men to get into. So he did that. It also was a time when people were out getting land. We'll talk some about that. James Roy wanted some land, and he wanted a good living for his family. Now, Mark found this. I guess you still got the Bible, which I thought was really neat. Two things I got from this. James Roy believed in God. And we'll see that through some of the stories they tell him about it. But this Bible, October 13th, 1900, that's his 18th birthday. So by his 18th birthday, it's hard for you to see. It's hard for me to see. I think it says Roy Goodson at the top. He had been to, oh man, I'm having a hard time. I know it's Denver and New Orleans and Baltimore, and what's the top one? Chicago. Okay. He had been to those four places by the time he was 18. This is from a kid from a farm in Missouri. So he was excited about that. A lot of places. And the next slide I thought is a real neat one. It was in Kent's box. This is the caboose. James Roy is the middle man. It says it right, it's written on the back. He has a fawn he's holding, a deer fawn. I have no idea what the story about the deer fawn is.
Is it alive?
I'm guessing it's alive. I mean, it looks alive from what I can tell. It's not limp. How's that? Anyway, so further proof that he worked on the railroad. A brakeman worked often out of the caboose. A brakeman, at this time, when he first started, they didn't have air brakes. So when they got ready to stop, the brakeman started the caboose, jumped from car to car, setting each brake, turning each brake. It was a dangerous job. And you had to be nimble and you had to be quick. On the larger trains, there would be a brakeman at the back, there would be a brakeman in the middle. When they got ready to stop, they both started working down the line. And James Roy's brother Jesse, we'll talk a little about, he was also a brakeman, and he worked with James Roy on one of the trains, and it talks about one of his letters. All right, this you're not going to be able to see it all, I'm sorry, but I'll just tell you about it real quick. I actually learned a few things when I worked for the government, and the last place I worked was the Bureau of Land Management, and they have all the records that the General Land Office had when it was formed. The General Land Office is what gave all these people who went to homestead, they gave them what we would call a deed, or something that looked like a deed for that land. Once they had proved up on it, it's called. They had to farm it, work it for a certain length of time, and prove it, and then they would get it. So the Bureau of Land Management has these. If you have some relatives that homesteaded and you want to look them up, I can show you how to do that. You can find them and find when they homesteaded and where it was at and all this other good stuff. Anyway, James R. Goodson had a homestead near Snyder, Oklahoma, that he got issued a patent for in 1905. The period of time for James Roy that it's a little unclear other than he was a brakeman is what happened between 1900 and 1906. It's likely, this is me, there are probably more than one James R. Goodson, so it could have been a different one. But in his life, later life, he comes back to Snyder, Oklahoma quite a bit. So he knows the country. Snyder, Oklahoma is where Grandma Irene got picked up by Jewel Ellis to get married. They were in school there. I'll talk some more about that. So I'm thinking it's likely that he might have done this, and then he may have sold it before he got married, or he may have kept it. I don't know. But that's just maybe. Anyway, it was interesting to find him there. All right. James Roy is a cool dude on the left. Now, when they first started taking pictures, I didn't look, you may have known this, they had stamp pictures, the size of a postage stamp. That's what these two on the left are, size of the postage stamp. And they had all these props that the photographer had there. So James Roy has a cigar, he has what looks like hundreds of dollars in his hand, this kind of stuff. But this was on a little page that had postage-sized stamped pictures on it, and I don't know if it was Grandma Irene or if it was Lily that wrote it on there. This is Roy Goodson right there. The top one is a picture of Lily and her two brothers. So it's early 1900s, just to show you that. The one at the bottom, I may talk some more about, but that was a postage stamp too. One lady on the left is Lily, and she was Lily Henry before she got married. The one on the right is Susan Emma Goodson. Susan Emma was 4 years younger than James Roy, his younger sister. I'm theorizing that James Roy met Lily through Susan Emma, that Susan Emma and her were really good friends because pictures of Emma, she went by Emma, are in this green box. They got kept all through Lily's life. So that's just my theory. All right. James Roy meets Lily and they get married in March of 1906. Here's an article about them. This paper is in Oklahoma, but it's just across the river from Paris, Texas. Who am I getting in the way of, Mark? It talks about at the home of J.V. Scrivener Monday evening at 7:30, J.R. Goodson of Danville, Illinois. We'll talk about that. And Miss Lily Henry of Bonham, Texas were married. They left on the southbound Frisco Monday night for Sherman, Texas, where they will make their home. So J.V. Scrivener is married to a woman who is Lily Henry's first cousin. She's actually first cousin on both her dad and mom's side because her dad was a brother to her mom and her mother was a sister to her dad. So it's one of those kind of deals. Anyway, but Eva Griffith Scrivener will be an important person in Lily's life as we go through her whole life. Here's a marriage record that got, see it signed J.R. Goodson and Lily Henry. So they get married. I know you can't read this writing because it's hard to read otherwise. But I tried to, there were like 13 letters, 12 or 13 letters from Roy to Lily, first year of marriage. And very sweet letters, some of them very sad letters, some of them. Roy basically wanted to provide for his family. He could earn between $4 and $5 a day working as a brakeman. If he worked as a farmer or other common wage, he could get $2 a day. So there was a big difference. So he's trying to do that. The problem is Lily is stuck back at home, not with him. And he writes this one from El Reno, Oklahoma. So he is working, and remember, Oklahoma didn't become a state till 1907. This is in 1906, so it hasn't quite become a state yet. But he's working this railroad, going back and forth, and he says in here, we are in El Reno, but we'll leave tonight for Amarillo. I think I'll stop at Weatherford, Oklahoma, and may go to work there. From what I hear, there ain't much doing at Amarillo. I'm not sure what Amarillo was like in 1906. But you can't tell anything about what you hear. This is certainly a beautiful country, and if nothing happens, we will come out here next year. How will that suit you, Mrs. Goodson? Lily, you don't know how I miss you, and I think it's a dead hard luck that we can't be together, and I could cry this morning if you do any good. That's not the whole letter, but that's the gist of it. He wrote another letter in July that I'll just tell you about, in which he talks about the money that he can earn. And Lily wants him back with her. Lily, in July of 1906, is pregnant with Marie, okay? She's going to be born the next year. So but Lily's mother's with her, so that's good for a while. Anyway, these letters are marvelous, and I transcribed them all. All right, to keep this time frame between 1907 to 1915 or so is pretty quiet as far as evidence of what he's doing other than being a railroad man and other stuff. But the kids are born. So Lily Marie Goodson's born in 1907. I think she was born in July or something like that. In Carson, Texas. When I first looked up Carson, Texas, all I could find was Carson County, Texas, which is in the Panhandle. I thought, what? But when I started looking at these letters, there's a postmark that says Carson, Texas on it. And it's one that he had written in Oklahoma, and it's going all these little post offices, stamp, 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 till it gets into Bonham. So I looked up Carson, Texas in 1906. And Carson, Texas in 1906 was a little town in Fannin County, Texas, north of Bonham. And in 1907, they lost their post office because it had too few people. So it's a little place. Now, I've always saw that, and her brother is Carol, but they pronounce it Carl. And Bush corrected me on that. Even though it's spelled Carol, it's pronounced Carl. So, Carl James Goodson was born in 1908 in Spokane, Washington. In 1905, James Roy's father and his two sisters and younger brother went to Washington. And they had some idea, according to Ann Bush Cope, that they could get rich there. Well, they took off, made it to Seattle area, came back, and ended up near Spokane, Washington, on the western side of the state. Susan Emeth, Roy's younger sister, started teaching school. Her sister met a man, married him. Susan Emeth caught tuberculosis. Her sister came to take care of her. She caught it. And they both died in 1907 or 8, somewhere in there. So that was a sad story, but I bring it up. That's all I can figure is that's how Carl got born in Spokane. That James, Roy, and family went when they heard they were sick or their family was in trouble or whatever, and they went to try and help. That's all I can figure. I can't find any proof of that other than Carl was born in Spokane. He's got a birth certificate that says he's born in Spokane. And anyway, I asked Uncle James once about this. He said he had no idea why Carl was born in Spokane. So Irene's born in 1911 in Direct, Texas, which is in Fannin County. Evelyn, oh yeah, this is the one that I didn't change on this. That's supposed to be, that's not movie. I got auto-corrected there and I didn't catch it. But I'm trying to remember what it is. Evelyn Molly Goodson was born in 1912 in Bonham, Texas. And lucky Eunice got to be born near Portales, New Mexico. And so they go into Portales, and we'll talk some about that. Alvin Roy is the younger son. He's born in Paris, Texas. Back to Paris, Texas. I should ask, do you know where Paris, Texas is?
Yes.
Okay, good. Anyway, so do you know where Sherman, Texas is?
Yes.
Okay, so east of Sherman is Paris, and what is it? I don't know. Is it an hour away, 45 minutes to the east, something like that. But I used to work in that country when we lived in Decatur, and so I kind of am familiar with it. Lois, and I put Lois D here. Diane informed me that Lois told her she didn't have a middle name. That by the time they got the 7th child, they were out of names and they didn't mess with it. That's what Lois told me. But she's born in Mounds, Oklahoma, which is just south of Tulsa. So that's the area that the kids are born in. This was kind of interesting. This is a picture of James Roy and his 4 brothers. The other brother has already died, the younger one. And it's kind of neat because I found a newspaper article that you can't read, I can see, in about 8 papers in western Oklahoma and 1 in Kansas about this picture. So what the article says basically is 5 brothers are having a reunion in, I can't remember if it's Broken Arrow. Let's see. Can you read that, Kent? Probably not. No. Broken Arrow, it is. It's in Broken Arrow in 1913. So Jesse Goodson, who's Roy's brother, Jesse's on the right, far right, upper one. Roy's in the middle, standing. They are both in the Oklahoma area right now. Leland is the one standing on the left. He's the youngest brother. The one sitting on the left is Ollie. He's the oldest. And then Frank is the one sitting on the right. Ollie had never seen Leland in his life. They were that far apart. So Ollie lived in California. He came to visit his folks and brothers and Jesse and them, and didn't know these other people were going to be there anyway. Frank was kind of the same way. Frank lived in Sherman. Frank was an engineer on a train his whole life. Yeah, look at those tides and stuff. Isn't that neat? Okay. But anyway, it made news and it was in all these little papers, so that was kind of neat. The bottom picture is got 3 of the brothers in it. It's about probably 1919, somewhere in there. Anyway, but he and his brothers were pretty close, going by their letters and stuff. All right, I told you that Eunice, who was Irene's younger sister, was born near Portales, New Mexico. In 1907, James Brookings Henry went to Homestead in New Mexico, south of Portales. I found his record. I proved what he got, what land he got, and everything else. But you can look at that house, and that's a mansion in that time. That's a terrible looking house, isn't it? But anyway, but it's all bare ground around it. It's dry country, very dry country. So his son Fred went with him, and he homesteaded 160 acres nearby. Well, in 1914, I'm not sure why, but James Roy and family went to New Mexico, and they were going to homestead. And he went through the motions. I don't think he quite finished it up. What happened is they tended to starve out in this country. It was just too dry. His brother Jesse homesteads before this up north of Clovis, New Mexico. It's a little wetter there, not much, but a little bit. He tried it twice before he finally gave up, but anyway. Okay. Yes.
Was there a railroad there, or why were they giving
Yes, there was
parcels of land?
there was a railroad that came from the north, Clovis, down to Portales, and also then from Clovis over to Lubbock, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, that railroad is what they could ride on and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'll have time to tell you a story. Carl tells a good story about running away from home. The way he ran away from home in New Mexico, he went and hopped the train, and he went to Lubbock. But anyway. Uh-oh, Kenny, whew, that was close. Sorry.
You're okay. Be careful.
Yes. All right. So in 1917, they give up on New Mexico. They come back to Shawnee, Oklahoma. Do you know where Shawnee is, Kenny? Okay. That's East Oklahoma City. That's what I see or whatever. And in 1918, he actually buys that 40-acre farm. He sells the farm. He doesn't stay there long for an almost new Model T Ford. For a Ford, a Model T Ford. And they lived in Okmulgee, Oklahoma for a while. And when he had that Model T Ford, he became a salesman for the Raleigh company. Now, how many of you ever heard of the Watkins company? Okay. Raleigh was like Watkins I guess Watkins is still around. I just remember mother getting some vanilla one day from a Watkins salesman. Yeah. Yeah, but that was back in the 50s when I remember that. But anyway. So it's kind of like that. And this tin is about a tin that big, that round. It had nothing in it. It was rusted shut. I didn't try and force it to see if there's any. It was light as could be. I didn't think there's anything. You could barely read it, but it's looks like what Raleigh put liniment and those kind of things in. So Roy's selling red liniment, mustard ointment, etc. And he does that through the 20s, I think. So in 1919, they moved back to Paris, Texas. So Paris still has Lily's cousin there, who's married to an oil man. So they're a little well off. Better off than Roy is, for sure. And he continues his Raleigh business there. In 1919, this person, Molly Henry is the sister of James Brooking Henry, Lily's dad, a younger sister. She never has any children. She outlives 2 husbands, and her nieces and nephews become who she keeps up with. And so Lily is one of those nieces that she kept up with, and she helped when she could. All right, 1920. Roy and family buy a farm near Blossom, which is east of Paris. They raise sorghum and peanuts. He runs a sorghum mill, and Alvin is born. Paris, Texas. In 1922, they moved to Mounds, Oklahoma, where Lois is born. Mounds, I think, is north of Tulsa somewhere. But then in 1923, they go back to New Mexico. And this picture is a good one. I've put in here who all's there. And some of the kids, I think, are Fred's, but I'm not sure who they are. But anyway, basically, this is the Fred Henry and Lily Henry Goodson's families. These two. Paul Henry is the oldest son of Fred Henry. Fred is Lily's brother. And then James Brooking is the older man near Fred. And his wife, Amanda, is standing next to him. And Lois is in this, down, a little girl down the lower left. Actually, Grandma Irene's in this one too. Neat picture. Okay, 1925, a couple more years. They moved to Kanawha, Oklahoma, which is not too far from Shawnee country. So it's east of Oklahoma City. I found an article in a local paper about J.R. Goodson, a new Raleigh man, moved his family from Francis to Kanawha Wednesday, where they occupy the residence owned by Hugh Bowles. So he's the new Raleigh man. Now we're getting closer to Grandma, what's going to happen to her. 1927. This picture, Grandma Irene's the one on the left. This is a year before she gets married. The man standing next to her is her cousin, first cousin, Paul Henry. Evelyn Goodson, her sister, is next. And the far one on the right, I wrote down Irma. It may be Emma, but I think it's one of Fred's daughters, Fred Henry's daughters. This you can't see. This has some good stories, or starts a good story about Grandma Irene and Marie. What I've tried to show in this map, the red dot is where Goodman, Missouri is. And this picture is taken near Goodman, Missouri. Marie's on the right, Irene's on the left. And it's written on the back here. It's by a creek, Indian Creek, about 30 miles from Goodman. Irene and Marie. Irene is taller than Marie. Well, Irene ended up being taller than Marie her whole life because Marie was a short woman. I showed this because you see Miami, on the left. You don't have a...
Yeah, there's a pointer at the top middle.
The top middle. Okay, I'll try it. Well, it's not liking me. Anyway, Miami is here, and a place at the very bottom you see Grove. Grove is going to be, that area between Miami and Grove is going to be where Roy Goodson family ends up in the 30s and early 40s. But they're in this general area. The Osho's up above Goodman. Joplin's off this map a little ways, not far. So, Ann Bush Cope says that Marie said she and Irene went to school in Goodman, Missouri. And what's important about that is Marie was determined to finish high school before she got married. Forrest Cope wanted to marry her right now, but she wouldn't do it. So her father sends her to someplace where there's school, and Irene goes with her. They live in a little apartment kind of thing. And every weekend, he would go get them, bring them home for a while, take them back kind of deal. Every weekend, Forrest Cope would pass him going to visit Marie after he'd already left. And he offered to take him. He offered to be the ride for him, but Roy wouldn't do that. Roy is very protective of his daughters. That's an issue that we'll see. So, what happens in 1928, I think they got married in April or July, the summertime. Marie finally finishes high school in Oklahoma. Well, where she finished it was in Snyder, Oklahoma, where Grandma Irene was. And then goes to a relative in Texas where Forrest meets her and they get married. They eloped because Roy would not agree to it. He wouldn't agree to Marie getting married. So about 4 months later, Jewel Ellis somehow gets to know Irene Goodson in Snyder, Oklahoma. And if older sister did it, Irene can do it too. And Irene doesn't care if she finishes high school or not, evidently, because she never did, as far as I know. But they get married, and this is their marriage certificate. And I'll read it off to you. Jewel Ellis says he's 22 years old, because technically he was supposed to be at least 21 when he got married, but he was 19. Irene Ellis says she was 19 years old. She was 17. So they lied about their age. They have a witness down here, 2 witnesses, Clint Wood and Mrs. Clint Wood. Mrs. Clint Wood was Dovey Bateman's sister. So she is Jewel Ellis's aunt. And Jewel Ellis's aunt and her husband vouch for these two so they can get married. This is a story that Kent tells, Uncle Kent told. And so Pearl gave Irene a dress to wear, and Clint gave Jewel $20. So they got married. Now, that's what Uncle Kent told me, and I remember that part. What I didn't know is the part that Marie told Ann Bush Cope. James Roy Goodson found out about this shortly after they got married. He drove to Arapahoe. He tried to find them to stop it, but he was too late. So that, I'm sure Uncle James would have liked that part of the story. I don't know. I'll go over this real quick. I was confused about this picture because the man on the far right looks a lot like James Brooking Henry because he has this big mustache and stuff, and he's tall and slender. But that is actually Forrest Cope's dad, Arch Cope, and his wife Hattie is next to him. Lois is standing behind him in between us. That's Lois Goodson, the youngest one. And then there's James, Roy, and Lily. Forrest is behind Roy. And the lady behind Lily, I'm not sure. I'm guessing that may be a sister of Forrest, but I don't know. And then Mrs. Johnson is on the left. This is a neighbor. In a lot of pictures, they would take the neighbor with them wherever they went. I guess maybe she liked to drive. I don't know. But anyway, she's in some of it. My mother told